Well, hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're looking at one of the entries in the second set of releases on the Atlantic 75th Anniversary Series from Analog Productions. One of the three releases that came out in early November was this one, Foreigner's debut self-titled album. We're going to compare this to three other versions. That vinyl shootout is coming up next on the Safe and Sound Texas Audio Excursion. So Foreigner's debut album came out on March 8th, 1977. It yielded three singles, Feels Like the First Time, Cold as Ice, and Long, Long Way From Home. The first two made the top 10 in the U.S., and it was really a big seller. 5 million records initially sold for this particular album. It made a pretty big splash on FM radio with some other tracks on the album as well. So it was a really great start for this new band that was formed with Mick Jones on guitar, Lou Gramm on vocals, Dennis Elliott on drums, Al Greenwood on bass, and Ed Gagliardi on keyboards. Now, the name of the band came about because Mick Jones realized that, well, two people in the band, Elliott and McDonald, were British, and the other three, the three G's, Graham, Greenwood, and Gagliardi, were all Americans. So he figured at least half the band would be foreigners, no matter what country they were in. So that's how the band name came about. This particular album now has been reissued by Atlantic as part of the 75th anniversary, and and Analog Productions, that is, has taken on doing this in a 45 RPM 2 LP format. And so that is what brings about this vinyl shootout. This particular one from Analog Production is mastered by Ryan K. Smith with sterling sound. So you know you got one of the top guys doing the job on this album. Now, my originals are the George Piros US copy and also a George Piros UK and a Canada OG as well. The Canada doesn't indicate George Piros on it in the actual dead wax in any way, but everything I've looked up says that that is the master they use, but it's pretty apparent to me the lacquer was cut differently among all of these between the US, the UK, and the Canada. And one of the real defining things in the Canada, the dead wax has a lot of area. In other words, there's a lot of area that wasn't cut. And on the U.S., it's fairly narrow. It's coming towards the center as far as it could go to be cut. And the U.K. is probably midway between those two. So we're going to talk about that a bit just in terms of outcomes because it does affect things. Now, of course, on the Analog Productions 45 RPM, you've got plenty of space because you're 2 or 3 songs on a side situation, of course, which is, of course, the opportunity for it to sound better. Does it? Well, that's the question. So my process for doing these shootouts, as a reminder, is have 2 turntables side by side and have the same cartridge on 2 turntables to compare the actual LPs one against the other, and I sequence them about 5 to 7 seconds apart from each other so that I can hear a portion of the song and then flip quickly to the other to hear it again on the other LP to see how it sounds and what the differences are. I then will also sync them together and then just go back and forth to get a variation difference as well. This gives me the best way to do it real time as opposed to playing a song on one turntable and trying to remember how it sounded and then playing the other record again and making a mental comparison. So given that, this was a very easy one to do from a process standpoint. But there were a lot of sections of this where there were not enough differences, frankly, especially against the US OG compared to the Analog Productions. there were some decided situations where the Analog Productions did stand out more than in other situations. And basically it boiled down to this. The songs that had a little more open elements in the song in terms of space and in terms of sound and maybe not as aggressive musicianship, like, let's say, The Damage Is Done, they really benefited from the open airiness of this. And even songs like Star Rider really had a nice, better driving beat. And don't get me wrong, all of the songs on Analog Productions had a little bit more punch than the USOG. There's no doubt. Now, the margin wasn't huge. The benefit that they gained in this Analog Productions was, in my mind, some of these other songs. Like, The Damage Is Done is a great song that, wasn't a single, but it got a lot of FM play. And it's really kind of showing off Lou Graham's voice, and it has a more open sound. And, these are the things that I think you get more benefit from in these particular pressings than you do maybe, the harder rock stuff. Although you get a little more punch, again, the delta between the two is not significant enough. But if you like some of these other ones, Woman Oh Woman, for example, those songs that aren't quite as hard driving, you're definitely going to get more out of this Analog Productions pressing and get a bigger sound stage and better instrument placement and sound, as opposed to the other songs, which have a lot more going on and, as I call it, more congested. And, the discrimination there in the AP isn't as much, because I don't know that there was as much to gain. But on these other songs, like I said, especially The Damage Is Done, that song really reels on this and really has a much more impressionistic approach on how it affects you. Which is, to me, is great, because it's one of my favorite songs on the album. It doesn't get a lot of play, of course. Back in the day in FM it did. But it did, in fact, open up these types of songs. So for me, even though the OG is really great, it did have some room for improvement on some of these songs. Now, again, if you're going to do the cost justification, a $60 album plus shipping and tax versus one you might find for $10 or even $20 for a really pristine one, you got to make the call how much you like the album. But definitely they did, through this process with Ryan K. Smith and Analog Productions, get more out of the record. And so to that value, it is there. Whether or not it's enough, or whether or not you like those songs that maybe got the most impact the most, would help you decide whether or not you wanted it. I mean, Cold as Ice, Feels Like the First Time, Long, Long Way From Home, those sound a lot closer to the OG. But some of these other tunes actually benefit more, ironically, from the Analog Productions. So as always, it's your choice. We're talking about the difference in some of these songs. Let's say like the more rockin' songs, maybe, a half a point better with the Analog Productions. And on the songs like The Damage Is Done, Star Rider, Woman Oh Woman, those a little bit softer songs, a little more open songs, about a 1 difference. I mean, it's there's a gap there, but it's not huge. So again, it's a matter of choice, but another great job done by Analog Productions. Ryan K. Smith delivering this Foreigner self-titled. As an extra note to you, I mentioned that I was going to be doing some system upgrades, and I have done the cartridge upgrade. And I'm going to be releasing a video telling you the differences between the two Audio-Technica 540 MLs that I have, and I will give you some impressions of it, because it's really interesting that there is a physical modification to the cartridge that can be made that can affect its sound. So stay tuned for that one. As always, thanks for watching, and if you would subscribe if you haven't, please click on the bell below and select the all option. And a thumbs up or like is always appreciated, as are your comments. So for now, thanks for watching as always, and we'll catch you next time on our next Safe and Sound Texas audio excursion. Take care, everybody.